Hey guys, it's Mrs. Olenichek, and today we're going to talk about cellular respiration and photosynthesis. Be sure to take notes and write down any questions you have. Be sure to ask when you get to class. Alright, we're going to start off with cellular respiration. That's defined as the controlled release of energy from organic compounds to produce energy, or ATP. So basically it's getting energy out of your food, and you use that energy for things like repairing damage, growing, and just living, for chemical reactions in your body. The overall reaction is glucose and oxygen react to form energy, carbon dioxide, and water. So here's your balanced equation, and this is really just an overview. There's a whole bunch of enzymes that are going to be involved in this process, and there's a lot of intermediates. We usually refer to glucose as the sugar or the food that's being broken down, but this can occur with lots of different compounds as well. So here's your overview of the whole process. You start off with glucose. You go through a process called glycolysis. So lysis is to break down, so breaking down glucose. And there you can form pyruvate, so that's the first thing you form. Now if there's oxygen present, this is aerobic cellular respiration, you'll go then to the Krebs cycle, and from the Krebs cycle to the electron transport chain. And the whole purpose here is to create ATP. So glycolysis is the first part of this whole reaction. And that's where you break down a 6-carbon sugar, like glucose, into 2 3-carbon pyruvates. You have to put some energy in, so you've got to spend some money to make some money. So you add 2, or you use 2 ATP and you create 4. And so we say you have a net yield of 2 ATP. So you spent 2 and you earned 4, so you overall have 2, a net gain of 2 ATP. You also have something called NADH, and these are electron carriers. They're going to carry a hydrogen ion and an associated electron over to other reactions. So they're also high energy carriers, so you can kind of group them together with ATP. So this is glycolysis. Essentially you take your big 6-carbon sugar and you add some energy, and you get out 2 pyruvates and 4 ATP and 2 NADHs. From here, you have to kind of make a decision. We say it's a branching point. So you use pyruvate or pyruvic acid, and if there's no oxygen present in the environment, you go into something called fermentation or anaerobic respiration. If there is oxygen present, then you're going to go to the mitochondria for the Krebs cycle and aerobic cellular respiration. So let's look at what happens if there's no oxygen. So if there's no oxygen available, you go to anaerobic respiration, so without oxygen. Also known as fermentation. The 2 types you need to know about are alcohol fermentation and lactic acid fermentation. And this will happen if there's no oxygen or no mitochondria. The problem with anaerobic respiration is that you can only make very little ATP. And so it's not really a viable source of energy. So if we look at the different types of anaerobic respiration, the 2 you need to know about are alcohol fermentation, which occurs in yeast, and this is where you go from pyruvate to carbon dioxide and alcohol. You regenerate the NAD plus that you need to make NADH, and so you can keep going through glycolysis, but you don't make any additional ATP in anaerobic respiration. One of the benefits of alcohol fermentation is that you can make things like beer and wine and bread. So the alcohol will burn off, and the carbon dioxide is why the bread rises. Lactic acid fermentation occurs in bacteria and animals like you and me. And here you go from pyruvate to lactic acid. So when you run out of available oxygen, this is one of those kind of emergency things that will occur in your muscles. That's why you feel muscle fatigue. It's not actually why you get sore, but it's why your muscles may stop functioning for a moment because they have too much lactic acid building up. You also use it to make yogurt. All right, now if there is oxygen present, you're going to have aerobic cellular respiration. And this is the type that we normally think about when we say cellular respiration. We're usually talking about aerobic cellular respiration. This occurs in the mitochondria. It produces about 36 ATP. And so you get a lot more bang for your buck, basically. You have glycolysis to the Krebs cycle to electron transport chain and chemiosmosis. And so I'll go through this with you. Essentially here, aerobic cellular respiration, you start out in the cytoplasm with glycolysis. And just a side note, glycolysis occurs in all living things. It's the first step in all living things. So this is another one of those pieces of evidence for all of us being related. Whether you're a bacteria or a plant or a human or a fungus, it all starts out here. So glucose gets broken down to pyruvate. Now if you do have oxygen and mitochondria, you're going to then have that pyruvate pass through the mitochondrial membrane and go through a link reaction where those 2,3 carbon molecules get modified slightly, and then these molecules enter into the Krebs cycle. And the Krebs cycle is actually where carbon dioxide gets produced, so you kind of like add and take away and rearrange bonds, and you produce more NADH and something called FADH2. These are just electron carriers. They're carrying electrons and hydrogen ions over to this electron transport chain over here. Here, the Krebs cycle, you're going to produce carbon dioxide and you're also going to produce ATP, but you get about 2 ATP per cycle. So here you can see you have NADH, FADH2, and you're getting a little bit of ATP, but then this last guy over here, this electron transport chain, is where you're going to get most of your ATP. So again, you get 2, 2, and 32. Another thing to be aware of is you're going to be creating carbon dioxide in the Krebs cycle. So one of the other products of the Krebs cycle is going to be carbon dioxide. And then here is where that oxygen is going to get used to make your water. So your glucose goes in, carbon dioxide comes out, and water comes out here. So the point of the whole thing is to make ATP. So next we're going to move on to photosynthesis. This is life from light and air. Essentially, it's how we make the food that you use to get energy. And in order to make that, we use light and air. Photosynthesis is just using light energy to form organic compounds, which are just stored chemical energy. It's a two-step process, so you go from light energy to chemical energy in the form of ATP and something called NADPH, similar to that NADH. And then from there, you go to a more stable form of chemical energy in sugars or organic compounds. So if we look here, you have carbon dioxide and water reacting with energy, right? Light energy is required to form glucose and oxygen. And here's your balanced equation. So overall, again, you have water going in here, oxygen coming out, carbon dioxide goes in here, and your sugar or glucose is going to come out. You can see some of your other players here. You have ATP and NADPH, and then the precursors for that are ADP and NADPH+. And all of this is going to occur in the chloroplast. All right, so light-dependent reactions, this first step of photosynthesis, are going to involve something called photolysis. These are your energy conversion reactions. This is where you go from light energy to chemical energy. And that's in the form of ATP and NADPH. The light independent reactions, these right here, also known as the Calvin cycle, is where that NADPH and ATP gets used. Remember, we're not going to call that the dark reactions, it's the light independent reactions. Here, these are your sugar building reactions. We say that the carbon gets fixed. So the inorganic carbon dioxide gets fixed into an organic form. We make it usable. And so you use the chemical energy in ATP and NADPH to reduce carbon dioxide or fix carbon dioxide to make sugars or glucose, C6H12O6. So if we look at the light reactions, what happens is the photon, that's the light, it's going to hit chlorophyll, which is the pigment, and that's found in the thylakoids in your chloroplast. That's the green stuff. The photon's going to hit the chlorophyll, and the electrons in the chlorophyll get all excited, and they start jumping up energy levels. Those excited electrons then fall down an electron transport chain and are used to make ATP and NADPH. Photolysis occurs in this stage. That's basically where you lyse water using light. And so your water is split, and it supplies hydrogen ions and electrons to replace the ones that got excited and started jumping around over here. And you also release oxygen, which is important since we breathe oxygen. So that NADPH and ATP are then going to be sent over to the light independent reactions, and they're going to help fix the carbon. So here's just another way to look at that. You have sunlight, it hits the thylakoid, gets the chloroplast excited, water gets split, ATP and NADPH are produced, and oxygen is released. Now you go to the light independent reactions, also known as the Calvin cycle. And this occurs in the stroma, that's kind of the watery area. ATP and NADPH provide the electrons and hydrogen ions used to fix carbon, so this is your sugar building process. Here's another view of that. So that ATP and NADPH are going to go into these light independent reactions. They're going to help fix the CO2 to produce sugars or glucose. They also regenerate ADP and NADP, so they can then go back to the light dependent reactions and pick up the more supplies. So here is kind of your overview. If you put it all together, you have sunlight is used to make ATP and NADPH with the help of some water, and you release oxygen gas in the energy building reaction, so that's converting sunlight to chemical energy. And then you have your sugar building in the light independent reactions, and you regenerate your ADP and NADPH. So overall, carbon dioxide plus water plus light energy produce glucose and oxygen. Plants are going to make both energy and food. And just to look at the whole thing all together. So photosynthesis occurs in plants. You produce glucose and oxygen as products. Cellular respiration uses the products of photosynthesis to get energy, and its products are carbon dioxide and water, which become reactants in photosynthesis. And that's it. I'll see you tomorrow. Write down any questions you may have, and we'll talk about them in class.